While she is now a food safety advocate and the senior trial paralegal with the Lien law firm, by the way, that's makefoodsafe.com, a Houston-based firm focused on safeguarding others from food poisoning, she has seen it all as a paralegal, from family law to civil rights to employment cases and even mass tort. With all this background, she has worked as an advocate and an educator in the paralegal profession. She knew that the most prized place of a paralegal is to, frankly, be the indispensable paralegal. And she took that knowledge and she put it in a book. And you guessed it, it's called The Indispensable Paralegal. And for those of you who don't know this, it's a 362-page book, has an amazing set of resources there for you and stories. And if it's something that you want to do to educate yourself and your understanding of the paralegal profession, you got to check this book out. And to discuss her career as a paralegal and the lessons that she learned along the way, please welcome our esteemed guest, Candess Zona-Mendola.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thanks for being a part. I certainly appreciate it. I just wanted to talk to the listeners and viewers here today about the book and especially your lessons along the way. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do now and how you made it to where you are at?
Wonderful. I help litigate foodborne illness and Legionnaire's disease cases. Infectious disease is my daily MO, what I deal with now. And I got here in a very strange sort of way. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was young, when I was really young. And I got a job at a law firm when I was 16. It was right by my high school. So I would just go over there after school and on weekends. And the boss told me if I became a paralegal, he'd pay me more. So I figured, hey, I'll do that while I'm going to college and before law school. So I went to paralegal school. And then, you know how they say, I was through the getting ready to go to law school process, took my LSATs, did well on them, got into some great law schools, but then life gets in the way. And instead of kind of bemoaning that, something else happened, I just decided, well, I'm going to be the best paralegal I can. And at the time I was working in a civil rights firm, and we were litigating some pretty interesting age discrimination cases at the time. And I just decided that, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be the best that I possibly can. And not just for me, but for the people I work for. Lawyers are incredibly dedicated people and very passionate about helping people. So, the plaintiff side has been my side for the whole time. And I just decided, to better myself and get some more education and just continue on. Got my bachelor's degree, got another degree, and it's kind of just all culminated from there.
Well, let me ask you about the path that you took, because you first started with a small law firm, I assume, and that really opened the door for you. Do you think the path that you took was one that is typical amongst paralegals, or how would yours have been different, if any?
So it is interesting. So I started with a relatively small law firm, not a super small law firm. They had about 20 lawyers at the time. And then I went to a solo practitioner. And I think the good thing about starting with a small law firm, and I think it's a give and take. I think most paralegals start in a law firm. Most law firms are, under 100 attorneys.
Right.
I think it's good when you're in a smaller place because you're kind of forced always outside of your comfort zone. My first law firm, which was Amesbury and Scott, they did kind of everything. They did PI, they did criminal law, they did family law, they did civil, corporate setups, immigration. So it was great exposure for me to kind of get my feet wet. And you're never bored. So it taught me that being intellectually inquisitive, which I consider one of my few superpowers, um, is something that was helpful, because I could take something new, I could learn about it, realize that I'm going to fail a bunch of times,
Mm-hmm.
and then through trial and error, try and figure out a practice. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably, if you were to say the one thing that would probably help, it would have been that. I really wanted to kind of learn new things, and I wasn't afraid of falling. And you can't be in this field.
Well, for those that are interested in being in the paralegal profession, do you have any suggestions on how they get their foot in the door the first time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, there's a big debate on, should you go to paralegal school? Shouldn't you go to paralegal school? I went to paralegal school. I think it was great because it taught me, the lingo, so to speak. But I think that you will agree, like, law school doesn't teach you to practice law.
Nothing about
Um, you
practicing
know,
law. Yeah.
exactly. Paralegal school doesn't teach you to be a paralegal. All of us kind of have to do that, on the job training, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice would be, for someone who's kicking it around, is go get a job at a law firm. My first job was a runner. I used to run back and forth to the courthouse. And that was a lot of fun, but it made me realize that, law was what I wanted to be in. But a good friend of mine who's a senior trial paralegal now, she was a receptionist. And, in the beginning, it's hard. You kind of are the bottom of the totem pole. But I think that people who work really hard, they rise really quickly. So that would be my recommendation, is just get in there. And, don't pick an area of law, don't, say, well, divorce is really for me. Just get a job and see where it goes.
Now, now, when someone has spent a few years in the legal profession as a paralegal, as professional staff, or even as administrative staff, what kind of skills do you think employers look to, or other paralegals, when they're assisting and counseling and advising in the hiring process? What kind of skills do you think they look for if someone wants to make a lateral move? For example, if they want to move to a different area of the law, if they want to move to a different geographic area, what kind of skills do you think are marketable and that a paralegal should focus on, at least in the early stages of their career?
Yeah. So I talk about this in my book, about the necessary things that paralegals need to have. And it's dependability,
Mhm.
flexibility, and adaptability. Um, and a lot of people would say, well, do you need to be a good writer? Do you need to be, a detail oriented? You do need those things, but those things can be taught. And I think the other things are kind of, a mental state of mind. You need to be dependable. Your attorney and your team need to be able to know that you are going to be there when things get rough. You need to be flexible. Again, you need to be able to jump on, learn something new, learn how to track stuff down, figure things out, and be adaptable, because the law is ever changing.
Right.
The- and I'm pretty sure that this. We did a big federal practice, and we got used to, you had 120 days to serve complaints. Well, it's now 90 days, right? And that's kind of a big change for someone who always does a federal practice. So I think learning how to be adaptable is one of the most crucial things that a paralegal can have to really succeed and just show they can do better.
And I guess to stay up on education too. I mean, that's one of those forms of
Exactly.
adaptability, right? Even if it's not required
Exactly.
in your state.
Well, and at least for me, I mean, I'm lucky to be part of a bunch of really wonderful paralegal organizations. But my approach is a little different. So I would say, yes, continue up on CLE, but I also like to attend CLEs that are outside of my practice area,
Mm-hmm.
because I have learned some very interesting things from them. I took a bankruptcy one a while back that was really helpful when we had someone file bankruptcy in one of our civil cases.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you'd be surprised how many Hague Convention serves are done for family law. I had a Hague Convention serve come up recently. So I recommend, yes, do CLEs, but kind of step back and kind of try something that's maybe out of your wheelhouse. because it might better your practice or help you look at something in a different way. And that's helpful to your attorney too.
Well, I noticed you mentioned paralegal associations. And I know there's quite a number of paralegal associations. And myself, I'm a excuse me, I don't know why I said paralegal. I'm an attorney. And, a lot of this podcast is a learning experience for me, where I'm on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And it's always fascinated me, the different types of paralegal associations and how to, for example, attorneys have usually the bar association, practice groups with the state bar. They also have, sub specialties and practice areas. So my question to you is this, and that is, what are the different paralegal associations that you see out there that you're involved in, and how do you differentiate between which one to join, which one to spend your time with? How do you make that decision?
That's a great question. I think it's individual based. It's a individual decision based on each paralegal. But I think it's kind of, as a paralegal, determining what you want, whether you want community versus, you want guidance or mentorship, or it's, more subject based. I can tell you NALA, who is the biggest one. Right. They're amazing. I've had the wonderful opportunity of attending and teaching at their conventions. I can tell you they offer some real quality products there for paralegals, and they teach them how to take the CP test, the Certified Paralegal Test, which is great. Every state bar usually has a paralegal association attached to it. The State Bar of Texas has an amazing one. So, shout out to my fellow Texas paralegals. But then there's some other ones that people wouldn't think of. So I'm a member of the paralegal division of the American Association for Justice. AAJ is an organization that is kind of near and dear to my heart, because they, are champions for, plaintiffs' rights, which is exactly what I do. But also the American Bar Association has a paralegal membership, and they're wonderful with like ethics and also with CLE. So I think it's really, kind of determining, what you want to do. There's some wonderful groups as well on Facebook. There's a Texas Paralegals group on Facebook. They're wonderful. There's also personal injury paralegals on Facebook, and a wonderful family law paralegal division on Facebook. So it's really what you're looking for. If you're looking for more of a community of people, or education based, which I am kind of really excited about. And then there's also wonderful places like NALS and NAFP that, are kind of like NALA and have local chapters. So a bunch of them are out there, and a bunch of them are open and willing to help any paralegal who comes in with membership or just getting to know other paralegals.
Yeah, I agree with that. AAJ is absolutely amazing. I have attended some of their events as an attorney, and it is great. The education is wonderful. There's always frequent flyer educators. They've been there a number of years, and there's a whole network of like influencer educators. And
I know
one of the things I love is they have these breakout sessions where you can do practicing of a particular trait or skill. For example, I attended a deposition workshop, and they make you do depositions, and they teach these little tricks that I've been able to employ in my own practice. So AAJ is amazing. That's really cool. They have that too for paralegals. Also Facebook groups. Those groups, depending on your specialty, can cover everything and anything. And it is really cool to go down the rabbit hole of those Facebook groups, because you can find a group of paralegals that focus on anything. And if you got a question, help is like 5 minutes away. They got forums, they have all kinds of practice pointers, and it's certainly awesome for paralegals and for attorneys as well. But a lot of times there's people to get on there and they really want legal advice, and you can't blame them at all. But it's what a great resource Facebook is too, and it's free, right?
Yeah, it's free. Legal Bevvy is also a good one. If they, it's pretty new. Legal Bevvy, Bevvy, and that's supposed to be kind of like a Reddit type thing
Ah,
for paralegals. So it's up and coming, and I think it's going to be a big hit one of these days.
well, that's awesome. I'm sure it probably has a little bit of controversy, maybe that Reddit might have too.
Always.
Yeah, of course. That's what people give the people what they want to read.
Yeah, you gotta do
Um,
it.
so I know during your practice and what you've been able to do, you have really have a little bit of background in everything, especially on your current employment at makefoodsafe.com. What is your life like there? I mean, the firm seems like it is doing some amazing work for people that
Thank
have been
you.
poisoned and food safety issues. I mean, your verdicts and settlements are huge, and it seems to
Well, I'm
me,
sure my attorney appreciates that.
yeah, yeah, certainly does, and it certainly has a lot of help to achieve that through you.
Thank you.
Can you discuss a little bit about what your 9 to 5 is, or 8 to 8? You know, what that's like, because you've been a paralegal for a while, and for
Mhm.
those that are in paralegal school, can you give them a little bit of insight of what the day to day is for someone that is as accomplished as you and as top of their game as you are?
I appreciate that. That's high praise. Thank you. Um, I mean, my day probably starts as most, attorneys' days starts and most paralegals' days start. I check my email and I check my
Mhm.
voicemail. Because if you are like me, I get emails and voicemails all the time. It doesn't matter if it's 9 to 5. I tell my clients all the time, food poisoning happens typically outside of work hours.
Yeah,
So
of course.
so I get those often. But it's the typical thing. I talk to clients. I draft discovery. I help my attorney with motion work. In fact, we are literally in the middle of finalizing a motion for summary judgment right now. So that's kind of fun. And I'm really lucky, actually. I have an attorney who he kind of takes me places with him, I guess.
Mhm.
I attend mediation with him, I attend depositions with him, and that's been wonderful because that's also kind of up my A game. I understand how to prepare for depositions better these days than I did when I was a younger paralegal because now I'm sitting in the middle of it, right? So I better know what's going on. Um, so I do those type of things. I talk to clients. My biggest and best use of my day is talking to our clients. Our clients know that they can reach me directly. We are very blessed that we have, other people who help us, but, you know, clients want to talk to the person who's working on their case.
Mhm.
They want to talk to the person who knows what's going on. So I try to always make myself available to our clients for that.
Let me ask you this question. How do you decide, and how does your practice decide when a client concern becomes elevated? When it's time to go from a legal assistant or paralegal to this is something an attorney has to make a decision on, or
Mhm.
other than the client specifically requesting it, how do you make that decision as a practice?
That's a good question. So obviously we follow the ethics codes,
Sure,
because that's the
100%.
way. And I don't give legal advice, nor do I want to give legal advice, mind you. I enjoy staying outside of prison cells.
Mhm.
But I think the biggest thing is first, all of our clients have a direct, an open door policy to the attorney. Jory and I really like to work hand in hand to make sure that our clients not only get what they need, status updates wise, but that they get equal access to him and to myself. So that's a big thing. The second thing is candidly, most decisions are made with each other. If there's something that I already know that we're doing and a decision he's already made, obviously, I'm happy to pass that along. But if there's something that's a bigger concern or something that has come up or a worry, it's a simple telling our client, hey, give me a little bit to talk to Jory. I'd like to talk that through with him, or, Jory has something that he wants to decide. So let me see if that's, still in what his strategy is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of open and candid with the client, and I think that that's a big thing that we're missing in a lot of law firms. I think that clients get really irritated because they try to reach someone and they're consistently getting pawned off.
Right.
They feel like no one's caring about them. But I think that you'll be really shocked and hopefully elated to hear that clients want us to be human beings too.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I don't know the answer to a question, or really if it's not my area, I just come right out and tell the client that. I just say, hey, look, I'm not the lawyer. I can't make this decision. Let me go talk to him, and either him or me or both of us will call you back. And oftentimes we both do, depending on which client it is. So that's an easy one to wait.
It seems like you've got great communication with your clients, always in touch. Also great communication at your particular practice with your attorney. One of the things I want to discuss is attorney paralegal communication. Where do you see the breakdowns? How can they be improved?
Yeah.
How do you improve communications, expectations? What do you think the state is in the paralegal legal profession when it comes to communication?
Okay, so that's a lot to unravel. So I'm going to take it a little bit at a time. So let me talk about where the breakdowns happen first. I think that that's probably where everybody gets concerned at the start. I think the first thing is I have to remind paralegals that lawyers are humans too, especially lawyers straight out of law school.
Are you sure they're humans?
Right? I think lawyers straight out of law school, and you know how this was when you first come out. They freak you out on all the different ways that you can lose your bar license.
Right.
And you're thrown into all this new procedure that you never had to deal with in law school. And so you're afraid that you're going to mess up, but you still want to make everybody realize that you're smart. And it's a lot of pressure on a young lawyer. And I think that lawyers and paralegals can actually bond very well during that time, especially more senior paralegals, because that is a crucial time that they can kind of show an attorney that, hey, I got your back, I'm here for you. But it takes a little bit of humility, I think, on the part of the paralegal.
Well, and the attorney too. I mean, they've really got to know that there are things they don't know, and to be comfortable in letting someone more senior, more experienced, show them the way, regardless if they're an attorney or not. But
Agreed.
yeah, I definitely understand.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think that for me, the biggest breakdowns of communications I've ever had with lawyers have either been because there has been some sort of miscommunication, something was probably said wrong, or it was simply because, there's kind of a battling of personalities. And I like to kind of be the person, I like to be the more graceful person, I guess, and not the more combative one, to try and make that relationship work. So when you get to the point of miscommunication or misinterpretation, this is my recommendation. I first remind paralegals that lawyers are only human. And I know that that's silly, but I think that we give each other more grace when we realize that each other is human. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I remind them that realize that whatever the attorney is discussing with you, that might be something they're thinking of, but is often not what they're worried about, right? So they're usually communicating to you from the place of worry. So they might give you an instruction, right? And it might not come out the way they want it to. So I do something that I call rephrasing. And even though Jory and I have been working together a really long time, I still sometimes need to do that because, just we have a lot going on and things can get stressful. So he might tell me an instruction, and I'm listening and I'm thinking in my head that either one, what he's asking me to do is impossible. Two, he doesn't realize how much time it's going to take. Or three, I just have no idea what he wants me to do. And then again, when I say it takes some humility on the paralegal's part, I say to him, let me tell back what I think you just
Oh,
told
that's
me.
perfect. Yeah.
And see if this is really what you're telling me to do. And if it's not, I need you to rephrase it. And so this way, what we're doing is we're clocking the deposition skill in their mind, right? Like, okay, it's time for me to rephrase my answer, rephrase what I was saying. And then usually by the second or third rephrasing, if it's really complicated, I know exactly what I need to do and how to do it. But like paralegals don't want attorneys to assume that we're mind readers, we can't assume that attorneys are mind readers either. So oftentimes attorneys don't know how long a process will take. And it might be something that I feel that maybe I'm spinning my wheels doing. So I'll often look at him and say, okay, you want me to do X, Y, and Z, and that's great, but do you realize it's going to take me 8 hours to do that? And the reason why I know it's going to take me 8 hours is because I might have done it before. And so I'll cite something that I've done before, and then he'll recalculate, oh, is this really what I want her to do? Or is there another more efficient and effective way we can get there? And this is great because this opens up not only the line of communication between attorney and paralegal, but also trust. You know, I trust that when I go to him and say, I don't understand what you're saying, he's not going to look at me and think that I'm stupid, because he doesn't, right? And that I know that I can come to him and question his authority, not saying that I question him as my supervising lawyer, but question what he's telling me to do, and that he won't get defensive and think that, well, you know, I'm stepping out of line or I'm trying to tell him what to do. You know, it's a relationship. You know, it's no different than a friendship. You know, you have to respect each other, you have to hear each other out. And I believe, although some of my comrades don't necessarily believe this, this is a controversial idea, but I believe this. I think that you need to get to know your lawyer. I think that you need to get to know them as a person, and then in turn let them get to know you as a person. Because I think that when we have familiarity with each other as human beings, we tend to be more accepting, more merciful, and more graceful with one another. And then the lines of communication can really open up and everybody feels safe.
That's a great point. One of the things I want to follow up with you on that is, and this is great, when you make it clear to the attorney, hey, this is going to take a certain amount of time, do you also add in, this might cost us to be able to do something else? Or is that a little too much? Like where do you strike that
Not
balance?
at all. Not at all. I think, well, and look, this is something that has to be grown, right? You know, you can't just jump into a role and start barking orders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really, I don't look at my place in the law firm as doing that. I look at it more of a partnership. You know, I look at it more as, you know, I'm helping him make decisions, but I'm trying to do what's best for the client and what is fiscally most responsible for the case, or what's best for the case, right? So if we're going to do something, for instance, let's say he comes to me and he says, hey, you know, Miss XYZ, let's order her medical records. And I'm like, what medical records would you want? I want all of them for all time, of all time. And I'm like, well, Miss XYZ is 75 years old.
Yeah, those baby records are going to be destroyed by now.
Exactly. So I remind that. But also, let's say we're in a place that has records for a long time, and I have been able to get records that have been more than 20, 30 years old, but it comes at a price,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I often will say, hey, we can totally do this, but factor in, it might cost us $4 or $5 grand to get them. And, you know, at that moment, it's like, okay, well, maybe we just need this. But a lot of paralegals are concerned about kind of being open about that. And I think that, you know, as long as we remember, one, you know, come from a place that, you know, that obviously you know what you're talking about, but two, come at it with with a whole heart, so to speak, I guess that's a way to put it, or just, you know, with a kind gesture, I think it'll be better received. I usually watch my tone with moments like that instead of coming snarky and being like, "Well, do you want to pay for 5 grand?" I usually don't do that. I'm like usually like, "Look, we can do that. That's fine. I respect what you want me to do. I just want you to know, in case it comes up,
Mhm.
it's probably going to cost us like
Right,
$5,000."
right. It's good.
And
It's
I
good to know
think
the
that you
real
can get along.
cost. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, you seem to do a great job of handling issues like this through stellar communication and expectation handling. One of the things, though, that I know you discuss in your book is that there are certain things that you can't communicate out of. There's certain things you can't negotiate, and one of those is the case killers.
Yeah.
And I would love for our listeners to hear you discuss the case killers.
Uh, yeah. So these are the things that keep me awake at night, literally.
Mhm.
So at least in my practice, that I can recall, and there might be others for people who practice different things, but we have four big case killers, so to speak. And really what they are is they're missed deadlines, right?
Right.
The statute of limitations, that's a big one. That's especially concerning for me in my practice, because we have a national practice. So,
Mhm.
I don't
Oh,
only adhere to one statute of limitations.
wow. Yeah.
There's some states that only have 1 year. There's some states that have 6 years. There's
Mm.
some states that might have 3 years, but if the person died, they only have 2 years. So,
And there's exceptions
knowing
to exceptions, I'm sure, in some jurisdictions.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then, don't even get me started with, some of the Louisiana ones. So, there's kind of a lot of different things to look at. So it's really kind of knowing what your deadlines are, knowing how to capture those deadlines, and kind of just keeping on them. So again, statute of limitations, failing to answer requests for admission in time. There are
Mhm.
some jurisdictions that if you don't answer them by the time the deadline comes, they're just deemed admitted,
Right.
period, and there's no going back. Motion for summary judgment responses,
Mhm.
and motions themselves, and appeals. I mean, especially appeals, right? Like
Right.
it's do not pass go, do not collect $200, if you miss one of those. And I call them case killers because I think I think that paralegals think that we always have to be perfect. And I'm going to be the first person to admit that I'm not. 21 years into my practice, I still make mistakes. I'm still a human being. I still, am trying to better my practice every day. There are things that just happen. But the point is you have to minimize the things that the mistakes on the things that you can fix
Mhm.
versus the things you can't fix, right?
Right.
So the case killers are the things you can't fix. You cannot fix that mixed deadline. But maybe you sent out a letter that had like a really egregious typographical error in it that
Mhm.
you didn't catch, right? Your attorney might not like it, but he can swallow his pride. He can call defense counsel and say, "Hey, that's not what was supposed to go out. Please disregard that." Or this has happened a couple of times. When I was a baby paralegal, I had forgotten to schedule a court reporter for a deposition, and that was super humiliating, and totally my fault. But that can be fixed by calling up a couple court reporting agencies and begging, and pleading and praying to God that you can find someone. So I mean, those are mistakes that aren't great, and your attorney might be, not happy with you, but it doesn't put them up for a bar complaint. It
Right.
doesn't put them up for, having to explain to the client why their case isn't going forward. So, the four case killers really, put them on your calendar. You set up reminders. I have like Post-it notes, and
Right.
I have like a weekly list that I go over with my attorney that has all of those on them. You got to keep them in the forefront of your mind all the time.
Yeah, I do that too as my practice. I tell staff, I say, look, you can mess things up. There's one thing you can't mess up
Hmm.
because, if the whole place burns down, we're going to know if how we're going to file a lawsuit, when we're going to file it. And
Hmm.
we not only set reminders, we set reminders of reminders. I just
Hmm.
learned a few days ago, one of my paralegals actually has a list that it's so OCD, but it goes out if something happens to her and she's incapacitated. Like
Oh,
these
I
are the
love
these are
that.
the dates. I was like, wow, that's next level OCD. I
I
mean,
appreciate that
who's
actually.
in charge of that list? Where's that list? It's
Where's
like, oh,
that
I have the
live?
list. But that's really one of the biggest issues is these
Mhm.
four case killers: statute of limitations, request for admission, motion for summary judgment, appeals. And there's also little subparts of that. For
Exactly.
example, so I litigate personal injury, a little bit of medical malpractice, and if I get a request for admission, if I send a request for admissions, and the other side either files them late and they're a case killer for them, I'm going to pursue it because
Oh yeah.
I have an ethical duty to
Hmm.
pursue it. But in the past, I've also attempted to get items deemed admitted when the pleading wasn't signed. For some reason, the attorney
Hmm.
did not even sign the pleading. In Virginia, that can be used against you in a uh, motion to determine the sufficiency of answers or a
Wow.
effort to deem the items admitted. So no, I get it, and those are the most important things. I mean, really,
Yeah.
if you have one top responsibility as a paralegal, as legal staff, that's number one.
Deadline.
That's
Yeah.
number. There's
Deadline.
nothing less than that. And so I suggest every week at least take another look.
Hmm.
Maybe a couple times a month. You got to make certain because the last thing you want to do is wait till the last minute, file a lawsuit, and then find out that you misspelled the name, and then there's
Right.
not enough time to amend the complaint. So you got to get on that stuff early.
Or
But
there's a party. Yeah.
right. Oops, there's a party we didn't realize.
Well,
But
and you
that
need to be especially careful. Sorry to interrupt.
no,
You need to
please.
be especially careful because there are some places where the statute of limitation isn't just you have to have the lawsuit filed,
Mm.
you have to have it filed and process served
Oh,
by the statute.
yeah,
And as I am not an attorney, I will not tell you where that is because I cannot give legal advice or
sure.
interpret the law. But I can just say there are like some scary things out there, you know? So I believe in the most conservative date. So I will
Hmm.
put my hard calculations are always the most conservative. If people are like, oh, well, the rule says holidays don't
No,
count,
forget it.
or,
Yeah.
no, the most conservative date is the date that we
You can't
choose.
play those games. And that's correct. So, in Virginia, you can file a lawsuit, but then if you don't have it served by a certain set of time, I think it's 1 year, then it's totally thrown out and
Yeah.
sometimes with prejudice. So,
Or
um,
heavens forbid, I don't know if you are following the new tolling,
it's
the
strange. Yeah.
post-COVID tolling stuff,
Right.
especially like I want to say in New York and New Jersey, it's fuzzy, right? Like, is it you get 30 days from the day the order went down? Do you get
Hmm.
30 days from the statute of limitation? I mean,
Right.
there's just all this more legal work that goes into it that you just do it on the day and
Exactly.
call it a day.
Don't even, if you're trying to get into the rule and you're lost in the minutia of the rule to try to see if your complaint or what other pleading you have is saved, you're already too late. You need to file that
Exactly.
stuff early and be OCD about it. You mentioned COVID. Now, I think I've heard of that. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, right?
Uh,
Have you? I just got
so
my shot today too.
yeah,
So,
congratulations. Congratulations. You can start getting back to the real world.
oh, I can't
Um,
wait.
uh,
My suitcase misses me.
yeah, mine too. We mentioned COVID. You obviously wrote this book. It was published in 2019 prior
Hmm.
to COVID, and you've done some CLEs with regard to doing work from home or being a remote paralegal. Has the world that we're living in today changed that practice, and how do you cope with this work from home aspect?
So I would lie to you if I said no, right? I mean, I think COVID has changed all of our practices.
Mhm.
So I was lucky, being that we have a national practice, being that I spent, like I just said, a lot of time on airplanes. I got used to working out of the office. I worked on airplanes, I worked in hotel rooms, I worked in deposition or mediation rooms, in courtrooms. I've gotten comfortable not working in the office. But unfortunately, what I think that COVID didn't prepare any of us for was, how do we become productive at home?
Right.
You know, and although I had worked from home sometimes before COVID, never to the extent that I work from home now.
Mhm.
So I have had to create like space in my home to work, and kind of like a dedicated space. And I don't have my home commute anymore. So there's no cutoff between work and, my quote
Mm.
real job, as my husband calls it, which is parenting our kids,
Mhm.
right? So, the changeover is concerning. I've seen that I've had a little less work to personal life balance in
Mm.
the post COVID world, so to speak. And I think, look, we're all mitigating that in different ways. I think the best thing that I can recommend, and what I have in my webinars for other law firms, is, make sure paralegals have what they need. Our biggest thing was, okay, we need more than just our laptops.
Mhm.
Jory and we have a cloud server, which is
Mhm.
amazing, which allows us to work anywhere. But, in Houston, where hurricanes happen, I don't need to worry about if my law firm gets, taken away by a
Mm.
hurricane, if all my files are gone, because my files, live in the cloud. So
And
that's a
let me,
wonderful thing.
may I
Yeah.
ask you about this? So what service do you use, and does that continuously sync with your computer systems?
Yes. So there's a bunch of different services. I've used a couple of them. Sync is a
Mhm.
wonderful service.
That's pretty
Um,
self-explanatory.
yes, SYNC. There's oh goodness, there's another one that a friend of mine uses that I can't remember now. I want to say it's called like NetLaw or something like that. That's really
Mhm.
wonderful. There's also Ignite, who the NASDAQ uses as their remote server, which is kind of amazing. That one was pretty good as well. So I think it just really depends on your practice. Do I recommend running your practice on Dropbox? No. I have seen some people do that. It is not HIPAA compliant.
Oh,
You want
okay.
something that's HIPAA compliant. They might have changed over the years, but at least back in the day, when I was kind of being more of a paralegal manager, it wasn't
Mhm.
HIPAA compliant. I've also seen people run their law firms on ShareFile. I don't really recommend those type of FTP sites.
Mhm.
Um, really kind of make sure, if you're using a cloud-based server, it's one that has really good backing on it and has multiple different places that they keep control of the records. I mean,
Mhm.
that's really it at the end of the day. Or if you choose to use a regular server, maybe it might be two.
Mhm.
Um, my colleague, Karen B.A. Schrader, who's an amazing lawyer, also part of AAJ, her and I wrote this article for Trial Magazine about how to disaster proof your law firm. And that was one of the things we recommended is, make sure you have, your right firewalls in place, make sure you have, your right security measures in place. And, if you're using a server or a cloud-based server, just make sure you have your backup after backup. And most really good ones out there will show you as part of their sales pitches, if in case of a an emergency, or if in case of a natural disaster, we got your back and here's how. So it's really easy to kind of vet those and just question the heck out of them and make sure that you know it's good.
It seems to me you are certainly multidisciplinary. You not only have the paralegal part covered, but you have the informational technology part covered. I mean, the educator part covered. In your experience, and you seem to have all the administrative stuff covered. You know, as to being a paralegal specifically, let me ask you this: what do you think the deciding factor is between the indispensable paralegal and someone that is just grinding it out day to day? What traits, other than dependability, flexibility, adaptability, take their paralegal game to the next level?
That's a good question. First, it's intellectual inquisitiveness. I think that, and I don't remember who quoted it. Someone once said that, the smartest person in the room will understand that they're not the smartest person in the room. So I like to continue bettering myself. So if there's something that I'm lacking in, I try to continually work on that. There was a time when I was concerned that my legal writing wasn't great, and I still work on my legal writing, but I was worried that it wasn't wonderful. And my lawyer sent me to Brian Garner's advanced legal writing courses. And that was amazing because Brian has this amazing way of teaching you how to say more with less, which is great. I think all of our attorneys' briefs need that. He also, right. He also teaches you about like heretofore, like, why do we say these words? We don't need to say these weird, Latin legalese jargon, just write like the judge is a human being too, just write like a person. Right. So I took, one of those, but I think what it is I've just been humble enough to go to my attorney and be like, hey, what do I lack? Like, what am I lacking? What is it that you see that I'm lacking? Or I've been in a group of other paralegals, and I try to see what they do that I think is better, and I try to learn from them. And that could be paralegals who are younger than me. I had a wonderful young paralegal teach me something recently, and of course my brain can't remember it because I have motions for summary judgment in my brain. But she taught me something I didn't even realize that I could do, and it was great because I love that I can continue learning even 20 years into my practice, and I hope at 30 years and 40 years into my practice I'm still learning. But I think that that's really what makes you, quote, indispensable, is you learn what your attorney wants/needs, and you learn what your own shortcomings are, and you just try to better yourself. But not just for your attorney, but for yourself. So you can be proud of the work product you're putting out, and you can really feel like you are helping your clients to the most effective, but to the best of your ability. Being a paralegal is like playing golf. It's not you against, the people you're playing golf with. It's you against the course. And really that's what it is it's your career against the course.
Well, I want to thank you for coming here today.
Of course.
You are a paralegal that certainly exemplifies someone that's not just paralegal, but a person that is always learning, that's dependable, flexible, and adaptable. And you are always educating and sharing your life experiences with other paralegals. And you share that in the Indispensable Paralegal. I believe that's available at, is it trialguides.com?
It is. I have a copy of it with me for people who want to see it.
Make sure you screenshot right there. If you're on YouTube, we'll put it in the show notes if you are listening to the podcast. So I want to thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for being part of the Injury Paralegal podcast. You've done such an amazing job. And as
have you. I look forward to future podcasts. This is a wonderful thing you're doing. I'm very happy to be part of it.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll be educational. Thank you so much and have an
Of course.
amazing day. Thank you again.
You as well. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.